Welcome to another dope episode of HipPodHedz. I am No Sage along with Novak as always. Please follow, like the show, comment, and Novak and I discuss our favorite hip hop moments. We got a special guest. I've been wanting this guest to appear on our show for quite some time. My homie, my co-conspirator, my colleague, Mata Suenos. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
So happy to be
hailing,
here.
yeah, so basically you hailing from the boogie down Bronx. Melissa's learned to balance her Nuyorican heritage with the corporate and higher education worlds. Raised on rice and beans, hip hop, and the Yankees, Melissa can also facilitate a leadership workshop, negotiate a contract, and charm a Southerner all on the same day, on the same pod.
That's right.
We in it.
We
We
can
in
do
it.
it all. That's right. I came here to win. So a little bit of everything.
I
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
you.
I'm so excited that we can finally do this. We talked about it a while ago, and so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Mata Suenos. So check this. Like, I know we've talked so much about like when we used to be work colleagues, like we talked about parenting, life hacks, cruise ships. I know you're quite the cruise ship connoisseur, but I don't think we really like dug deep into music and like
Yeah.
rap and hip hop and all that. So
Yes.
um
No, my love stretches way back, right? So obviously I was born in the Bronx. I don't live there anymore, but when you live in the Bronx, you have no choice, right? Like you're either listening to the music your parents raised you on. So it was either salsa music or hip hop music growing up in my house. And so it started at a pretty young age and it's never left me, right? You can take the girl out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the girl.
Understood. So growing up in the Bronx, in terms of hip hop, what were your influences? I mean, what were you listening to?
Yeah, so I'm going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of my 29th birthday this weekend. So I'm a little
Okay.
bit older, okay?
hey.
And
Uh so, it started for me with like Salt and Peppa and the Beastie Boys and Public Enemy, okay? Like I'm a huge Public Enemy fan and that's where it sort of started for me. And as my life sort of progressed through different cities, as I moved to different places, it kind of evolved as I got older, but that was like the origin, right? So, um, my love for hip hop really was with those big three, and then lots of others, but that's where it started.
cool. Yeah, I remember Salt and Pepper. So, did you have the 8 ball jacket and everything like that, or?
Yeah, I wanted the 8 ball jacket. I didn't have it, but I wanted it. No, what I did have was, they used to have those denim jackets with like the fleece collars.
Hmm.
That was something I needed to have, right? So that there were those were really popular at the time. All the hip hop stars were wearing them, these like denim jackets, these big like fleece and furry collars. I made my mother go out and buy me that. Even though it wasn't as popular for a long period of time, for when it was popular, I had one of those. So I felt pretty good about it.
I love how you said like you're not, like in the Bronx no more, but you still can't take it out. Like
Yeah.
take it out of your heart. Like so you're in Miami nowadays, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm thinking this over a little bit because we had on episode 14 our buddy that Ginger,
Hmm.
Ginger from Kellogg, right?
Yeah.
And she sort of had, I don't want to say a similar trajectory, but she came from New York and she moved to Florida. So I was just curious on like you saying a word on like that sort of back and forth migration of folks that kind of come both directions, I guess.
Yeah. It's a super interesting dynamic. What's really different about it, like in New York City, I was surrounded by a lot of like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. My parents are from Puerto Rico, and then a lot of African Americans. And even though New York is really diverse, that was who was like I was surrounded by as a kid. And then you move down here, and it's a lot of South American influence, a lot of Cuban influence,
Mhm.
and the music is very, very different. So you go from listening to like, you know, LL Cool J and Public Enemy, and down here it's like Luke and the Miami bass kind of music. So that was a huge transition for me because it definitely wasn't the same. And now I think now I've kind of I have a strong affection for like the reggaeton type of scene, you know. So obviously Bad Bunny's Puerto Rican, so we have to give him props. But you know, J Balvin and Ozuna, like I think some of those, that's kind of what I'm into now, much more than like if I had to pick somebody new. But I think that's a function of the influence down here, right? Like that's a lot of what you hear on the radio. That's a lot of what the culture feels like here. Super different than New York. And then in the middle, when I was in college and sort of moving up and down the East Coast, there were a lot of different influences and sort of, you know, it's like a whole evolution from where I started to kind of where I am now.
So you said Luke. Yeah, you made me smile there. I mean, like his sound is so like so interesting. So like you think about today where you got a lot more female artists that are a lot more like Luke. And
Yeah,
you know, a lot of people are like, oh, she says so much. I'm like, we grew up on Luke.
right.
So it's like,
That's right.
so it's hard to judge like like anybody today who's kind of raunchy, because raunchy was the whole 80s and 90s. You think about it in a nutshell.
Exactly.
And you get into like, you talk about the Bronx, so you get into Akinelli and everything like that back in the day. And that, we thought that was obscene at that point in time.
Yeah, no, it's funny. When I was in high school, I did some debate, and we had to do this debate about like music censorship. And you know when they started putting
Mhm.
labels on CDs and saying like parental advisory labels like they do for movies. So we had to sort of debate that topic. But you know, it's like I didn't know any different, right? That's what I grew up listening to. And so and even in the streets, right? The language was there. So I don't know, like for me, the obscenity back then was a little bit different. I guess now if I'm listening to it in the car with my daughter, I probably go like I probably cringe a little just because it's like, okay, I don't necessarily need her, you know, saying the see you next Tuesday word or whatever, but like, you know, um it didn't impact me back then. And I guess maybe now because I'm a mom, it sounds a little bit different to me, but I hear what you're saying. Like, you know, it's not shocking to me at all, right? Like I'm used to hearing it.
So to go on a side tangent, I love that you're bringing that story about you writing something about the music scene and the parental advisory. Um, so my side tangent is that I had to write in Catholic school. I think it was just like a one pager about like what song is very poetic to you, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
literally wrote down and this assignment like I used to love it by Common. Like this is why it's poetic to me. Okay. Um, and then the teacher was put off by the obscenities in the song, right? Like, I think she was saying like I used to do her, and then the West Coast did it or whatever. So like she was so fixated on, the female aspect of the storyline, right? So I had to go back and I flipped it to Scarface. I never seen a man die till I seen a man cry. She accepted that. And I actually wrote down the clean version of that because I mean it was a little more straightforward. Okay, I understand it. The guy was like dealing with sad stories and he finally cried and whatever. But the messed up thing that's cringeworthy for me is that I couldn't convey to the teacher that hip hop was being metaphorical as a female, right? At that point, that message kind of went over my head, and I had to go to my cousin who we had on the show. I had to say, "Can you believe this teacher rejected this assignment?" And then she automatically knew the metaphor that I was missing. Like, why don't you just tell her that it was hip hop? Like, what? And she kind of blew my mind. I'm like, damn, I missed it. I missed the
Yeah.
jam right there.
I had a similar situation with one of our colleagues at Kellogg, my former boss, Greg Hanafy, right? So Greg used to play these games at dinner where he would go around the table and put you on the spot and ask you a question. It was kind of like a conversation starter. And Greg loves music. He's really, really into music and songwriters, but he's not into hip hop at all, right? So he came to me and asked me like, who was my favorite artist, or like what was my favorite musician? And I have to say, like, I have a love affair with Jay-Z, and it's gone on for a really long time. And I said that. And like, there are a lot of things I admire about Jay-Z, not just his music, but the fact that, he started lots of businesses, right? Like, he's sort of um, persevered over lots of different evolutions in his life. And, but saying that to Greg Hanafy, like, I think I lost, he lost a little respect for me that day. But I believe it in the sense like what you're saying, the poetry of it all. Like one of my favorite Jay-Z songs is called Lost One, and he sort of talks about it's a slower song. He talks about his nephew dying. He talks about, you know, his relationship with Beyonce. It's like an older song. I think it's off of Kingdom Come, but you know, to me that's a super poetic song. It's very introspective. It's very like you know, him looking at his life and like sort of trying to strike this balance between being super successful and then all the human things that happen to you. So even though Greg didn't like my answer, I stand by it.
Respect that. I respect that.
Respect that. I think the thing is when you think about like Lost Ones, right? That's what you said, Michelle, on the track.
Hmm.
You know, when an artist pours their soul into a song, you feel it. That's what makes you go, "This is good music." And that's the same thing that No Sage went through with Common. Common literally was in love with hip hop, and he saw the way hip hop kept getting used by everybody and being put back into the culture. And that's what drew me to Jay-Z as well. Being a Chicagoan, it's weird that we like more East Coast. Sometimes we like what's in our own city because
Yeah.
Wu-Tang, Jay-Z, Mobb Deep, Nas, Boogie. You're talking about the Boogie down Bronx. You
Yeah.
get into
BDP.
KRS-One and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
BDP.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You get into that whole movement, and even when you go out to New York, it's a soul of the city that sometimes that grabs you. When you're in Times Square seeing those guys sleeping on the bench, the first thing is I gotta see the rest of the city. So I love going to New York and visiting. It's one of those places where you go there, and it's like the mecca of everything that we're doing here in Chicago, LA, everywhere else. LA, and California's got its own styles. So does Miami. So does Orlando. Orlando's got rappers I didn't know
Hmm.
about. No
Right.
disrespect, but it's like it's like get back to what No Sage about hip hop, how it evolved. Everybody's taken a piece of it and turned it into their own world at this point.
Yeah. You know, and I grew up at that time where there was that huge sort of rivalry between East Coast, West Coast, right? And so it, you know, when I was young, you couldn't like anything from the West Coast. Like you could not say to anybody I grew up with, like, oh, I want to listen to Dr. Dre or NWA or anything like that. Like that was not acceptable. Once I moved away, like I started to appreciate it more. I started appreciating Dre more and sort of how Tupac made his transition and was sort of, more embedded with the West Coast rap scene, the hip hop scene there than in the East Coast. And, I was sort of listening to some old stuff the other day. And, Biggie has a song going back to Cali, and I've been playing that one on repeat lately because it's just, like it was silly, the whole thing, sort of the rivalry. And there's a lot to appreciate from both coasts. And look, you're from Chicago. I have love for Kanye. I think he's totally crazy, but like a lot of his earlier stuff and it's like fun hip hop, right? Like those beats that hook you in, and those even though they're sampled, whatever, but like that stuff is super, like it sticks in your ear, it makes you want to move, so I have a lot of love for your hometown boy Kanye, even though he's kind of lost his mind.
Yeah, maybe he finds him again one day. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah, he
got to
did
get the
drop.
meds right. He's got to get the meds right,
That's
and then he'll
true.
be all
That's
right.
true. This mental break era we're in. He did drop a new track last week, so
No,
at least
did
he's
he?
still kicking
I
around.
haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, yeah. He addresses some of his cringeworthy acts, but it's he's still staying active. But
Yeah.
like I just love when you're diving into the whole like Jay-Z affection, because knowing like being like entrepreneurial minded, like as you like to tap into those spaces, and like um when you lean into that part of your ethos, as it were. I mean, that's dope, because it's like every time we had a conversation, I don't know, like I just hear hip hop. I don't know if it's just like the New York accent in you, or just like the
Yeah.
way you carry yourself. And we never like we're spitting rhymes or we're in a session or nothing like that. So that's why I just been wanting to geek out with you. But like the other thing too is when we had Ginger on, I'm not sure if you've ever seen this show. So we were talking about rap shit, which is on HBO Max now. So
Yeah, I've
season
heard of it. I
two,
haven't watched it. It's in my
yeah.
queue. Yeah.
I'm curious your hot take on it, because they just dropped season 2 this month. I haven't watched it yet, but the very thin narrative, which kind of fits here, is like there's these two female MCs. I think they sort of grew up. Was it high school or college, Novak? Do you remember?
High school.
Right. So somehow they went different ways, but I think they were in Florida, right? And then they're both trying to tap into like the Miami rap sound. But the one rapper was actually, before they found each other again, she was trying to do her like East Coast like message rap. Like she was calling herself the Vision. She was rapping with masks, and it had a whole like, you know, like underground like New York sound. Yeah, yeah. And there's this whole plot line about like this boyfriend that she's trying to make it work that actually goes to school in New York. And it's kind of like, you know, the whole mental mindset of like, should she actually like channel into that, or should she more embrace her party side, you know? So there's kind of a back and forth between New York and Miami. But I just find that really fascinating because yeah, I myself was latching on to like some of that character where it's like, okay, I found hip hop as like a means to express myself, but then it doesn't always have to just be this closeted like message doom and gloom thing. It could be like so many different things.
You know, I think it's like, so for me, I moved away from New York when I was in high school. So it's always going to be a part of me, but it's not the only part of me, right? And so, you know, I think what you probably sense is that sensibility that's never left me, right? Like I've got a fire in me that I'm kind of a hustler, right? Like I am super driven to be like successful from a work perspective, not necessarily like in an entrepreneurial perspective, but you know, work is super important to me and being good at my job. And so I grind it out. Like that's just how my life has been. And I think that's kind of what you see. I think it's also the directness that you develop when you live in New York City. You have to be super direct. You have to have kind of like a hard shell. Whereas I think in the Midwest, there's a little less directness. I think some people were sometimes taken aback by how direct I am. But I think for all of us, right, like we have these different pieces that we have to pull together in life. And sometimes I have to put on sort of the professional, you know, leadership facilitator role or whatever. And then sometimes I like to put on my headphones and, you know, just jam out to my favorite music. And so I think part of what hip hop has given me too is you know, like an irrational confidence that you know, like if I need to get hyped up about something, I'll listen to a song that's gonna hype me up. Like one of my favorite songs growing up, like Special Ed was one of my favorites, right? Like I Got It Made, right? Or I'm the Magnificent. It's like that braggy kind of like, you know, I could do this. And so I think it's given me sort of this, it is irrational confidence in a lot of situations, right? Like whereas I might be shyer or, you know, less confident, it's always given me this you know, it's kind of helps me get that extra push when I need confidence, because there's been, you know, there's so much like bravado, right? There's so much bragging and so much like hype. And so I need that in my life.
You mentioned Special Ed, man. I Got It Made. That was one of the best videos of that time, man. The way he told the story, fighting the bully and everything. You
Yeah.
know, that song, man, always started up. I mean, you go from Special Ed to Big Daddy Kane.
Yes.
You look at
Yeah.
that whole swagger, man, that those guys had. Even Kool Moe Dee had that
Kumo
swagger to.
D. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, at one point in time, New York was on fire. You know, they were birthing MCs at that point in time.
Yeah, that's right. And look, it's the kind of you know, it was the kind of rap and hip hop that was like about swagger and not about like, even though there were lots of hard things going on in New York City at that time, there still are, but like in the Bronx at that time, it, you know, it wasn't the safest place, it wasn't the cleanest place, you know, and but like I appreciated the fact that the music that was coming out of there wasn't merely focused on the negativity, right? Like you had, like you were saying, that those artists that were about the message, right? And I think that's kind of why I love Public Enemy, because I was a nerdy kid. Like I love to read, like I'm into the news, and just to hear that kind of music that was focused on making a change and, you know, changing your surroundings or like pushing for social change or political change, you know, I think that's why I loved it from the beginning, because it wasn't about all the I mean, there was some of it that was about the badness that was around you, but it was really about, okay, we can rise out of this, or, you know, I have the swag to get out of here, whatever it was. And I think that's why that was important to me at that point in my life.
That's amazing. Yo, like, so how how have you seen your daughter's like musical taste, as it were? Because yeah, you just dropping gems on me. Like, I knew I knew that you had a respect for the music, but I didn't know. Like when I hear special ed, like that just brings me joy. Because like, if how can you not be hip hop if you come in with like a name like special ed and you come in hard, you know? So like that's like hip hop in itself. But like, have you even seen, I don't know, like your daughter even know like some of these like gods, as it were, that that you appreciate? Because like I feel like the old message behind some of the hip hop is that yes, there's the message, but sometimes the, I don't know, the misogyny kind of gets in the way. You know, people
Hmm.
kind of like, you know, put it in the corner, almost like Greg was put in the corner, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like this kiddie sandbox that not necessarily, you know, should be respected, I guess.
She has a really eclectic music taste, right? And so
So
she has been influenced by me, I think. So, I mean, I think the person that walks on water in this house is Beyonce. We went to see Beyonce in concert in August, you know, but like it ranges from like we saw Taylor Swift in April, right? So it's like Taylor Swift on one end, Johnny Cash, and then Beyonce, SZA. Like this is Tyler the Creator. She's obsessed with. So she has a really eclectic and diverse sort of musical um, sort of her preferences. So it all depends on who's in control of the speaker in the house, like that day, whose music is going to be playing. But she has sort of an appreciation for the music I listen to. She hasn't fully embraced it. I think where we probably overlap the most is Beyonce, because I'm a huge Beyonce fan, separate from Jay-Z, right? I was a Beyonce
right.
fan before them together. Them together, I love. Her on her own. Lemonade is like, I mean, that could be my life soundtrack right there. So we both have a strong affinity for Beyonce, and so that's probably where we overlap the most.
I love it. It feels like you're sharing a lot of the speaker space that Novak's sharing at his household over there.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I cringed for a minute. Yeah, I know about the Taylor Swift
yeah,
situation right now.
yeah,
Like we did
yeah.
my daughter wanted to do the concert, but she's 11. I didn't want to take her to the concert, so we went and saw the movie. It's 3 hours of Taylor Swift performing
Hmm.
in the IMAX, and I was sitting
Yeah.
there just like, make it stop. So she's like, "Daddy, put your phone away. You can't play Mafia Wars while you're watching Taylor Swift." So I was like, "All right." So I put it away, but yeah, Beyonce. The thing with Beyonce is it's amazing from a male perspective. I find myself knowing the words to "Sorry," and I'm just
Yes.
sorry. Like, why the hell do I? Why am I singing this song "Sorry"? And you know, because the bass, you know, what attracted me to that song was the bass line. Can
Hmm.
you ever listen to the
Hmm.
way that thing rumbles inside a car or inside a
Hmm.
house? I mean, you can see Jay-Z's influence on Beyonce. So it's crazy that he's writing some of these songs from a, you know, from a male perspective, as an angry as a female has been cheated on. That's what that
Yeah.
whole Lemonade album is about. It's about infidelity. So you
Yeah.
should sit there. So like, you know, my daughter plays it sometimes. I got a clean version for her, and then I got my own version. Then we got into vinyl with it. So we got all the Beyonce vinyl. So my daughter goes, "Can you play Sorry?" I'm like, "Why?" "Because you were late picking me up from practice." I'm like, "You know what? That's not infidelity. That's just me being late." You know? So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going through the same space you're going through. It's amazing. Like SZA's her wallpaper in her on her
Hmm.
computer. Then Tyler the Creator is like who they go to when they need to feel happy, which
Hmm.
I don't get this right now. Tyler
Right.
doesn't do happiness to me. That's like emo rap. That's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's like goth emo rap at this point. Like little Uzi falls into that picture with them too. So they got a weird, you know, like taste in music, but it's all good music at the end of the day.
It is. Yeah, it's funny because she went to see I let her go to the Tyler the Creator concert. I think it was last year, the year before he came down to
Mhm.
Miami, and he had this Colombian her name is Caliucci, and she's sort of this Colombian artist but she speaks in, she sings in Spanglish, right? Like half of it is in Spanish, half of it is in
Mhm.
English, but a lot of it is exactly that. It's moody. A lot of the other artists that she likes that are not in the hip hop scene, they're more like, female guitarists and Mitski. I don't know. That's the next concert we're doing in January. I don't know Mitski unless it's on, her speaker,
Mhm.
but it is that, and maybe it's the age, right? Like you get these preteen and these teenage girls, like this is the vibe. Like I was Public Enemy, so I had a different vibe going on at that age, but theirs is more the moodiness and the feelings, I guess.
Yeah, I got to see SZA in concert at United Center like a few months
Hmm.
ago, with my wife, and it was dope, man. We are in a SZA science for sure. There's even like a nice track that she actually played ODB on the screen, and while he was spitting his verse, but it was amazing because it was sort of like it was like this big like boat in this ship, and she was like appearing in different parts of the ship, and like the whole projection of it made it feel like you're actually at sea and SOSing with her. It was nice.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed. Like I love going to concerts, and throughout my life I've gone to lots of different artists, right? Like across the spectrum. But that's what makes it fun when you have a big show like that. Like I mean, obviously Renaissance was insane, the
Mhm.
just the dancing and the artistry and like the costumes and all of the sets. I saw On the Run too. So Jay-Z and Beyonce. I actually saw it at Soldier Field
Ah.
a few years ago. And like I love that. I love to see it big and glamorous and shiny, and I love to see the costumes too. That's another thing I love about hip hop, because well, some hip hop, because I'm bougie, right? Like they call me Queenie at home. Like I love Sparkle. I love Gucci. I love name brands. And so that's another thing that I can relate to. So I want to see the big sparkly show. I don't want it stripped down. I want to see the lights. I want big screens. I want guest stars. I want it all.
So you just described what a Kanye concert was like before the moment.
That's right.
It was Balenciaga. It was
Mhm.
man, it was like, I went to one Kanye concert at Soldier Field. They were selling $300 socks in the parking lot, and I was just like, who is wearing these socks? Because when fashion and hip hop kind of did that merge, I'm just as
Yeah,
bad as you. I'm Louis Vuitton. I want them
yeah,
LV trainers. My
that's
wife's
right.
like, what do you get with a $1,200 pair of trainers? I'm like, the LVs.
That's
And
right.
she's
They
like, but
look good.
they look good. Now,
They look
sometimes
good.
they don't look good because the shoe
Yeah,
size. I wear a 14, so my
yeah,
LV looks like this. So my daughter always goes to me like, "Daddy, we need more Yeezy, so we need this or whatever." So I'm going through that. You probably going through that. The whole fashion aware kid, where they're
yeah,
basically they want like certain fashion. Like right now is dunks in my house. I need that. I need born dunks. I'm like, what? I'm like, do you have a born job? She's like, no, you have a job. I need these dunks. They're special. Or we're going through mischief boots right now. You probably know about those. The big red boots. So my kid went through I need red boots to wear to school. I'm like, where are you going? I'm wearing these to school. So
yeah.
I support that all day because that individuality that you get from hip hop and music helps them like developing who they're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. When I mean, picking out outfits for Beyonce was like a several week endeavor. Like, she had a very specific vision about what she was going to wear to this concert. Like, there was no one going to tell her that she could not execute this vision. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I love the individuality of it all. And, I mean, we have to sort of, um, walk that line between like everything you have can't be designer, my child. Like, like you say, I'm the one with the job. You're still a cost center, right? When you start working, then we could talk about it. But it's fun to, like I got her first Coach bag, right? Like to start, and it's fun for her to. She gets very excited about those things, and I let her borrow some of the things in my closet. It just sort of depends on where she's going and what she's doing. So she has a little bit of access because we wear the same shoe size. So she
Uh,
thinks mommy has a good accessory game. She doesn't necessarily like the way I dress, but she thinks I've got good shoes and purses. So
Man, that shoe size thing is scary. My wife, and my daughter both were like women 7. So
yeah.
once they get in the same shoe size, then you're starting to see. My wife is like, I don't like dunks. I don't like these particular shoes. I like these shoes. So my daughter's like, Mommy, try these on. These look better on you than me right now. Your shirt matches these shoes. So now they're starting to switch shoes off a little bit. It's pretty funny. I don't have anybody switch shoes with, but yeah, I do agree. I mean, that first Coach bag or that wallet or something you get them, it blows their mind. Like now, this little one acting in the day talking about what's Hermes. I'm like, stay away from that site.
That's it. That's it. Don't go back there. That's inappropriate for an 11-year-old.
Oh, she's trying to figure it out. She's like, what is your watch band? I'm like, it's a watch band. No, it's not. Show it to me, Daddy. I'm like, get away. She's like, I want one of those. No, Daddy has a job. So it's a constant battle.
Well, you know, what's cool about it though is that they have access to all kinds of things that we didn't have, right? So, you know, my daughter will find new artists and new music in a way that we couldn't. You know, like, how did we find a new artist back then? Like, someone handed you a mixtape or something, right? Like, you couldn't just listen constantly on Spotify or, like, you know, scrub the internet and have suggestions from the algorithm of who might be the next big thing, whatever. So I think that's kind of cool too, though, that they get to explore it in that way. Like, it was harder for me, I think, to find new music. So it was more about what was on the radio, or when I moved away from New York, what was on MTV at the time, MTV Raps or whatever, like what were the best videos, like you were talking about, Special Ed with his amazing videos, whatever. Kwame, do you remember Kwame? That polka dot. Yeah, exactly. That's how I found new music back in the day. So I think it's cool that now they have other ways of exploring.
I remember the first time I heard Third Base, and I was sitting there, Gas Face. I was sitting there like I was infatuated with. I'm watching this. I'm like watching Pete Nice and everybody. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, like, you know, but it's, you know, I think what drew us into hip hop was the videos, man. You know, this is before Hype Williams. Before Hype Williams, there was just guys, you know, showed up with local crews and just filmed videos. You know, MTV Rap started it. You know, then it went toward the Sir Mix-a-Lot era, then it evolved again. So, I mean, I think visuals in hip hop, and you talk about the concerts, I know seeing Notorious Big in concert in high school was like crazy. And I think about that today. When you talk to a kid about who's the GOAT MC, and, you know, some people scream out, you know, that's, you know, it can't be Big, that's Pac or something. I'm like, I saw both of those guys live. So it's weird to tell somebody like, yeah, I saw Biggie in concert. Like, what was that like? I mean, Big was a different force. I saw Big in Chicago, and then I saw Big again up in Milwaukee. So I drove up to Milwaukee to see Big, and I was like, I saw Pac. You know, I'm not going to disrespect either one of them in that situation, but I lean more toward Big than I did toward Pac at that point. And, you know, a lot of people feel that, neither one of those guys is not the greatest MC at this point. You know, a lot of people say it's Rakim. And, you know, but, you know, Rakim, I always see him as the guy MC. So I see him totally different than other MCs because you can't put anybody, Rakim's in his own category almost.
Yeah, you know, it's all very subjective, right? And so people want to argue about who's the best and whatever. And I've gotten into these arguments with my friends before because they say, look, you're not really into hip hop because you like Public Enemy. You can't say that, you know, because you like this, you know, this rap with a message, right? But, you know, the way that I feel about it, that's what resonated to me, right? And so I think there were periods where each one of these, you know, whether it's Tupac or Biggie, they resonated with you in different ways at different times, you know, and I think it's hard to compare. It's hard to compare and say one is better than the other. Like some days I'll say Tribe Called Quest was my favorite. I can listen to them all day, every day, you know, and then sometimes I want something different, right? I go back to like, you know, the harder music, right? And so it just kind of depends on the day and the mood and what was important to you at that time.
No, you're right, because you think about Griselda right now, which is you know, you're talking Buffalo. That's still New York, but it's a whole different lifestyle compared to like they're like the if Wu-Tang had a hybrid kid with Mobb Deep, it's called Griselda. If you think about it, you know, we're talking Prodigy. We're talking Prodigy like levels of, you know, street level at that point. But like, you know, you're right about that. I mean, it all depends on what your mood is like. There's times you listen to Tribe Called Quest, I left my wallet in El Segundo. Yeah. And you're just riding around the city, any city you're in, and you feel that album. Or it's times you listen to Wu-Tang and you sit up there listening to 36 Chambers, you're riding around the city and everybody's bothering you. Right. you look out the window and, you know, you hear cash music, everything around me. You see guys in the corner like, I got to lock my car door. So it changes your whole mood, what you're listening to when you're riding around.
I know. My daughter was playing Azalea Banks the other day in the car. I was like, "What are you listening to?" Like, I cannot with Azalea Banks. Okay, like she goes, "No, mommy, this one's okay. This one's not so bad." But it does impact your mood. Like, I was like, I'm not in an Azalea Banks mood today, right? Like, we'll have to find something else to listen to. But I'm right there with you. Like, some days I'll want to hear, like, I'll just listen to Jay-Z all day, and then some days it's like, De La Soul, or I want to go all the way back, and I want to reminisce on the Beastie Boys, right? Like, I never got to see them in concert. I think they would have been so much fun, but that's kind of, it depends on the mood and what you got going on in your life at the moment.
I missed them 3 times. I almost saw them at the House of Blues, no Sage, when they had when Intergalactic came out, and that song was, man. One of my guys saw. He said that was the dopest song to see in concert, because they actually put on those, the Japanese radioactive suits from the Godzilla era, and they're on stage and they started moving like robotic. And he said, man, it was nice.
Yeah, what is it? Check Your Head. Is that the name of the album? That album was the soundtrack of
Hmm.
my college, right? Like, that is, I mean, and I remember listening to them when I was like in the 7th grade, but then they sort of made this evolution, and that album when I was in college, like, it just was all we listened to all the time.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, like, so to kind of go back to one of the things you brought up before, Melissa, aka Queenie, aka Bougie Queenie over there. So I was actually listening to this hip hop podcast. Shout out to the Breaks Radio, and they were kind of gushing over like Nas's like dope drops. I think he dropped like 6 or more albums or something in the last year or so. So it's been like, unprecedented amount of like prolifery he's been doing. But they're talking about all this grind. They're talking about all these rappers they like. And then there's this segment where they're talking about, hey, so what you watching? Right. And then one of the grimy hosts was like saying, yeah, I've been going back to watch some Laguna Beach, I think. Right. And you're like, what? Why are you doing that? He's like, I just like to see how privileged like folks like live. I
Mhm.
just like to like tap into that. And
Yeah.
I think there's a part of hip hop too, like besides, like it finding a nerd kid that's trying to find their way and find their message. It can also like be like almost like a hall pass life to say, hey, like you deserve more for yourself. We are like naming all these like name brand stuff, but it doesn't always have to be like that. You can definitely strive a little more for yourself. Like there's nothing wrong with it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one show that I have been obsessed with over the past few years is The Shy. And a lot of that came from, even though I'm here in Miami, traveling back and forth to Chicago for 10 years, right, with my job at Kellogg, and I've never been to the South Side. Okay. So always up on the North Shore, and either downtown or in Evanston, never really understood sort of what life was like on the South Side. And watching that show, obviously it's fiction, but it sort of really, I think, hits home as to like how different a city can be. It's like saying you go to New York City and you only go into Manhattan, right? Like, you're only in Midtown or you're only in Times Square, and there's so much more of the city that if you don't branch out or see, like, you don't necessarily get the vibe. You could think everybody in New York lives like on Park Avenue, and that's sort of the way people live, right? So like when you're in Evanston, you kind of feel like, wow, Chicago's, look at this place. Everybody's got these big houses. Like, this is so beautiful. And then, you see The Shy, and it's a very different story. So that's one show that I'm obsessed with. It's on, I guess it's in between seasons right now, but I totally get what you mean about seeing sort of the other side of how one group is, or one city is.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about the West Side, South Side, North Side, East Side of Chicago. They're all different personalities. Or even go to, like you said, the North Shore of Evanston. Go a little bit north and then go to Lake Forest or somewhere like that. That's like driving to like Staten Island in New York, pretty much. The whole personality changes. Like, I felt that like when I go to New York or you go to California or somewhere. I'm gonna just say every city's got boroughs.
Hmm.
We take that from you guys, the whole borough concept.
Hmm.
These different personalities. Like Chicago got Pilsen. Pilsen's sitting on the west side, like between west and south side, basically. But this is his own community that's almost bigger than the west side. And it's amazing how much personality. Like like when you go to New York City and somebody said they're from Mexico, that's like rare because everybody's Puerto Rican, Dominican, or
Yeah.
whatever in New York City. You come to Chicago, there's people come from New York and be like, I've never met a Mexican person. I went to Chicago. I'm like, how is that possible? So it's common to us
It is
every
very
day.
possible. Yes, it's very. I don't think well, no, I had one friend growing up who was half Mexican, half Puerto Rican, I think, and that was
Mhm.
unusual, right? Like to have anything that was not like Puerto Rican Dominican was super different. And this is something that kind of cracked us up from the Kellogg folks in Miami, because everybody down here is either Cuban, Dominican, Puerto Rican, or
Mhm.
from South America. And then you go to Chicago and the Mexican influence is so strong. And that was kind of shock because the cultures are very different. So like
Mhm.
boroughs are different, the different Latino cultures are super different, right? And so we always joked about it because it was like it's so normal to have that Mexican influence in Chicago, but for us it's like very unique and different because we're so Caribbean or Latin American influenced down here. And
Right.
in New York, wherever I grew up, it was all like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans.
So going to that in hip hop, we talking Fat Joe, we talking Big
Hmm.
Pun.
Big pun, yeah.
And in terms of those relationships, how much of their music would you say was influencing your everyday life?
Yeah, definitely. I think Big Pun and Fat Joe are the two that stand out. I think, look, Daddy Yankee transformed how sort of people think about this mixture of hip hop and just Latin music in general. I mean, when that song Gasolina came out, like what was it in 2000 or 1999? And like it's not even the greatest song, right? Like if you think about great reggaeton songs or great, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? But it was such like a different sound and it changed, how that type of music could be integrated, how the Caribbean sort of integrated itself into hip hop. So I think that evolution was super interesting to see, right? Because you wouldn't, in the New York hip hop scene back in the 80s and 90s, you didn't see a lot of Puerto Ricans. It was dominated by the African American community. You didn't see a lot of Dominicans participating. And, there was that evolution with Fat Joe and Big Pun. But then I feel like Daddy Yankee kind of changed the game and created a whole new genre, or at least put that genre on the map. So, that's kind of, I think, how my brain sort of looks at that evolution.
I love that. I know you're running short on time, but my quick hot takes on what you just said is like my older kid, I think, has more of an aesthetic like you. Like when you're talking about Beastie Boys and stuff like that. Like I think my 12-year-old definitely leans into his rock side and he respects the rap gods too. But my younger one, he really wanted to see Daddy Yankee. I kind of feel bad that I didn't get to take him to see him when he was here. Um, and to kind of like tie it together, sort of. So like I grew up not only a hip hop kid, but like Novak knows I'm like a film fan first, right? So it's kind of like kicking me in the head that I grew up on the DC like Batman era of Michael Keaton, and now it's like nothing to brag about, right? But
Yeah.
you twist that on its head with like, I was never a Spider-Man kid growing up, but the Spider-Verse movies, Miles Morales, the
Miles Morales,
soundtrack, both
yes.
soundtracks, like
Yeah,
I'm like all in, and like that my kids are in it, so it's kind of like it's interesting how you talk about the Daddy Yankee effect. Like I feel like that's like the hip hop New York effect too, through the movies and through the
for sure.
animation.
My daughter could not care less about a Marvel movie, I'll tell you what, but she is obsessed with the new Spider-Verse. Like the fact that Miles
Mhm.
Morales is Puerto Rican, and my daughter's half
Mhm.
Puerto Rican, her dad is not. He's white, he's like going back way generations. Um, American, like from Europe, whatever. But she's and we talked a little bit about this when I was at Kellogg, like she lives a foot in both worlds, right? Like trying to figure out her countryside with the Johnny Cash and her family that lives in Georgia, and then the Puerto Rican side. And so I think that Miles Morales character and that really resonates with her because it's sort of this icon that she has, and she could care less about any other Marvel movie. You could not get her to go to like Aquaman. But if a new Spider-Verse movie came out, she'd be like the first in line.
I mean, kids are infatuated with it. My daughter's infatuated. It's like it's crazy when you're sitting up there singing. The fact that you got a whole hip hop soundtrack behind that Spider Man with a little reggae tone on the back of it. When he's sitting in his room, he starts singing that song, man. You know what I'm talking about? And then my kid word for word knows all the words to all the songs on the Spider Man soundtrack. And I'm sitting there like, when did you learn this at? It's Spider Man, Dad. It's Spider Verse. So every kid, like, like my background is crazy. Like one grandma's Creole, mother grandma's Cuban. So when you get into these relationships and you look at how everybody, it's these melting pots in this country. So she taps into that whole different music genre when she listens to Spider-Man. She steps out of Spider-Man and goes into a whole different mind state. But I think Miles Morales, man, it finally put a person of color, man, in a superhero movie other than Black Panther. And you
Right.
think about, like, he basically is not perfect. Neither was Black Panther, but I relate more to Miles Morales than I do to basically T'Challa in that situation. Because
That's right.
you're talking more generational differences. Because this is really African versus African American. It's a whole different lifestyle. You think when you look at the Black Panther movies in that regard.
For sure. And growing up for me, like it was like Christopher Reeve of Superman, right? Or like
Mhm.
Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. Those were the superheroes back then. So I just love that there are different types of superheroes now. And in my daughter's eyes, Beyonce is a superhero. Okay, she qualifies as superhero.
Yeah.
So I love that there are these different, multicultural influences, and she's gonna be a much stronger woman than I am. Like her point of view and her affection for all things artistic is way more honed and curated than mine is. So I think that's kind of cool too, that I planted the seed, but now she's sort of grown into this. She's got all these different amazing, diverse artists to pick from to sort of curate her own preferences. But maybe a little bit came from me playing Public Enemy in the car on road trips. So
Respect, respect.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, on that note, I know you had to run in a sec, but did you have any other final thoughts for us? Mata Suenos.
what are my final thoughts? Listen, you will never be able to take the New York City out of me. Like you will never stop me from loving Jay-Z, even if he's like 65 and his dreads are all gray and whatever anybody says about him. Some people they like to talk
Right.
about like how he's not the best lyricist or whatever, but Jay-Z forever. That's
Facts.
how I
Did you ever
feel.
go to see the Book of Hove exhibit? I think
I wish. No, I have
it
his.
finishes on his birthday, I
I
think.
know. Yeah,
Oh
his birthday's the
man.
day after mine, so that's another
Yeah.
thing. We're both Sagittariuses. But no, I have the book. I have his book sitting like prominently on my mantle, but no, I haven't made it up to New York City to see that. That would have been amazing. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. This was a great treat for me this week.
Love it. Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you, Melissa. Did you want to close it out, Novak?
I got it, got it. Yeah, definitely, Melissa. Thank you for man chopping it up with us here, man. This has been awesome. Yeah, you got me right now. I want to go pull out a Grand Poopa CD, man, and just sit there and listen to it, while I work this afternoon. But yeah, definitely appreciate you for coming on. We gotta chop this up again. We gotta talk Spider-Verse. That
That's
I definitely
it.
want to get into. That'll be, we might get a lot of people on that particular episode. Uh, Definitely check us out everywhere where podcasts are available. Go out and listen to something dope today. Go out and do something positive. All right, peace.